How we doing, folks? Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. Now, Monday is the inauguration of Donald Trump, a day I'm looking forward to. These last 4 years have been interesting to say the least, with Joe Biden running the country. But Monday, we finally get to turn the page on this current administration and have a leader and a president who doesn't have dementia, who can actually lead our nation and hopefully bring us to a better place in the future. Now, next month is February, which will be the third anniversary of this war in Ukraine. And that is what I want to talk about, because with Trump coming into office, I initially was pretty bullish on him being able to sit down with Putin and negotiate an end to this conflict. But the more I think about it, the more I think that this may not be possible. And this is for several reasons. And the first thing is that this war has gone on again for almost 3 years now. And both sides have made an incredible investment in terms of life. We know that Ukraine has probably lost over 500,000 men killed in action. Over 500,000. And Russia, we don't have a concrete number, probably well over 100,000, maybe 200,000. So they too have made a huge investment as far as life, not as much as Ukraine, but certainly again a big toll on them. So when you have countries who have invested so much in those terms, do you really think they're going to want to sit down and go, okay, we fought long enough, let's just stop and go home? Or are they going to say, no, we've gone this far, we're going to get what we want, or we're going to die trying? And that's the way it sort of feels right now. Putin, he went to his countrymen and sold them this war. So if he just picks up now and stops it, without getting the things he demanded, his countrymen are going to hate him. The Russian ruling class won't like it. And people don't realize Putin is actually fairly moderate compared to some of his countrymen who want a complete war against Ukraine, who want to level Kyiv. So Putin is actually not the worst the Russians can do as far as a leader, and the West should keep that in mind. So the best time for a negotiated settlement was probably back in April of 2022. And that was when the Russians and Ukrainians were actually negotiating and come to a preliminary deal. But we know now that Boris Johnson flew in from England, the UK. He met with Zelensky and convinced Zelensky to stop the peace process and continue the war, which is what happened. So there was a window of time where it could have stopped. We could have had a deal, but that time has passed, and that time was over 2 years ago. So for that reason, it's going to be really hard to stop this war. And if you actually nail down on the details, what Putin has requested for the Ukrainians, for people in the West, it's a non-starter. There's an article from the Atlantic Council, and the Atlantic Council is ground zero for neocons. And this article is from the 5th of January, 10 days ago. And the title is, Putin's peace plan is actually a call for Ukraine's capitulation. Well, that's not good. That doesn't sound like Ukraine is ready to agree to a peace deal. And here's what he says in this article. Ever since the abortive peace talks of spring 2022, during the initial phase of the full-scale invasion, Russia has insisted that any peace deal must include territorial concessions from Kyiv, along with Ukrainian neutrality and the country's comprehensive demilitarization. If these terms are imposed on the Ukrainian authorities, there can be little doubt that Putin would use any subsequent pause in hostilities to rearm before renewing the war in the coming years. So, Putin's deal is capitulation, and they're saying that if they shrink their army, the Ukrainians, and have neutrality, at some point in the future, Putin might say, you know what, we took part of Ukraine, why not take the rest of Ukraine because they can't stop us? So that is the Ukrainian concern. On the other hand, Putin says, if I allow you to keep your military, you could rebuild, rearm, and then in the future try to attack the Donbass again and reclaim those lost territories. So both sides, when you look at what they're demanding from the other, it seems like a non-starter for both sides. So again, I don't know what Donald Trump could negotiate that would be something both sides could agree to. And the last thing, too, is when you look at proxy wars, and this is what this is, a proxy war between the United States and Russia. When you look at proxy wars, you never really have negotiations and peace deals that actually end a war. What you usually get is some sort of ceasefire that either holds or doesn't hold, or you get total victory from one side. So let's go back and look at some of the proxy wars and conflicts that the United States has been involved in to see if there was actually any resolution to the conflict from negotiations. And the first one is the Chinese Civil War. We had the communists, the People's Republic of China, fighting against the Republic of China, who we backed up. And the PRC, they drove the Republic of China off the mainland, and they fled to Taiwan. And unfortunately for the Chinese, the communists, they did not have enough military power to invade Taiwan and finish off the Civil War. So what happened? We started defending Taiwan, and then obviously now we give them weapons, which we've been doing now for 30 years. And we say we support the One China policy, which says Taiwan is part of China, but but in reality, we undermine that and we push for Taiwanese independence. So that war, the Chinese Civil War, has not officially ended. They just stopped fighting. And that war, in my opinion, won't end until there's total victory by the Chinese, because they're never going to agree to allow Taiwan to be independent and be their own country. So that will simmer on until China finally brings it to an end. Then we have the Vietnam War. We supported the South Vietnamese against the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong. We fought that war for years until eventually we withdrew. And there were ceasefires between North Korea and South Korea, but they didn't hold. And eventually North Korea invades South Korea, takes the country over, reunifies both sides, and that is a total victory by the Viet Cong. Then we have the Korean War. We fought on the sides of the South Koreans. That war never actually officially ended, but there was an armistice. An armistice is not an end to the war. It's a cessation of hostilities. So theoretically, North Korea, South Korea, they are still at war, and obviously over the years we've seen all the tensions on the Korean Peninsula with the rockets being launched. and we have both sides on either side of the 30th parallel, where their soldiers will put on a show for the other side to show their toughness. So there's still tension there, and technically the war has not ended. Then we have the Cold War, which we claim ended in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. Did it really end? Well, as we know now, it did not. Russia obviously was the center of the Soviet Union, and after the collapse, we talked to them, we negotiated with them as far as things like the removal of nuclear weapons from Ukraine. We told them that we wouldn't expand NATO eastward. Of course, we didn't keep that promise. We expanded NATO eastward, and then we started to use color revolutions in Eastern European countries to undermine the pro-Russian governments, to overthrow them, and install pro-West governments. And that happened in Georgia and Ukraine and other countries. And so we say the Cold War ended, but it really didn't. It just changed forms, and this proxy war in Ukraine is a continuation of our attack on Russia, trying to collapse the Putin government so we could eventually integrate Russia into our Western system. That's what this all was about. We knew when we got involved in Ukraine that it was a red line for Russia because of the historic relationship between Ukraine and Russia and its strategic location. So we did provoke this war. And we did want Russia to invade because we thought our sanctions, our arming of Ukraine, would cause, again, the collapse of the Putin government. But it did not. So for these reasons, I think it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to negotiate a peace deal. And even if he does, will that peace deal actually stick? Or will it just delay another conflict, for in the future? Will one side attack the other side when they feel they're in a stronger position? So I'm not very confident in anything Trump can do, and it won't be his fault. It's sort of just the way things are structured that make it almost impossible. And so the only way I think this conflict can actually end is if there's a total victory on the Russian side. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. What I think is most likely to happen is that there's going to be a situation like in Korea where Russia, because of the stronger side, takes what they want and at some point decide that moving forward is no longer useful for them. And they harden their lines, they dig in, and just protect the territory they have. And if Ukraine tries to mass troops and tries to rebuild, they'll periodically launch missiles in to hit depots and hit military bases and keep Ukraine weak. So I think that, unfortunately, that might be the most likely solution. A simmering war that just goes on forever because, again, historically, these proxy wars between the United States and Communist China and Russia and the Soviet Union, they never really end. They just change forms and keep on going. So unless the Western leaders finally accept that Russia is going to be Russia and will not be integrated into our Western system, unless that happens, I think these hostilities with Russia will just keep on going. And so, unfortunately, not as bullish as I was a month ago on the idea of peace in Ukraine. But if anybody can do it, it is Donald Trump. He is an enigma. He's a curveball. He is different than every other politician out there. So I don't want to underestimate him. I hope he can get it done. I hope I'm wrong, but unfortunately, not too confident. But we will just have to wait and see. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.